Okay, so great to have Liz with us today. Liz runs her own marketing company, Rushall Marketing, and she's also been doing a fair amount of work, or a lot of work, over the last couple of years on the Futures project for British Marine. That's where a lot of this information has come from, and some of you may have listened to some of the webinars that Liz has done previously on the Futures project. This is going to expand on that and also just look at the last 12 months that we've been through. Liz is also on the RYA participation and membership committee, so has a really great understanding about the RYA and our clubs and our training centres.
Thanks for that introduction, Amanda. Let's crack on. As Amanda said, I was going to run a very quick poll. It very helped me, especially as we present. Hopefully you should get a poll popping up on your screen. Just really want to understand how you guys run your marketing at the moment. So if you could just answer those questions that are up on screen. Just very quickly, just take a few seconds, just click the one most appropriate to you. It just gives me a sense of who's listening. Perfect. Oh, answers pouring in, thank you. Great, that's lovely. So it looks like the majority of you listening in are either doing marketing as part of another role or probably lots of roles. And about a quarter of you have got a dedicated internal resource. That's really helpful. Okay, I'm just going to close the poll now and we'll crack on with the presentation, and I'll try not to let it get out of control again. Right. Okay, so very quickly, what I'm going to cover today, obviously we're on the topic of attracting new customers. We'll just touch on the why for that. We'll look at some key questions, some frameworks that I've got for you, some tools that might be useful. And then we're going to focus on the importance of understanding your customers, especially new ones, and what their needs are. Some ideas on how to reach them. And then delve in a bit more on the importance of having relevant content and some easy win points with search engines. So let's crack on. There's an awful lot to crack through. And as Amanda says, do pop questions into the box. So why attract newcomers? Obviously, those of you who attended the RYA conference, I did a session talking a lot about the participation trends, what's happened to consumer trends, things like changes in learning styles. All of these things are important to you in terms of sort of finding new customers. But also, of course, we've all been through 2020, the pandemic year, and we've all seen the impact of the staycation and the opportunity that presents us as well for boating. And figures I picked up last week at the British Marine Expo from the Tourism Alliance, the staycation effect is anticipated to last perhaps for another 2 to 3 seasons. So that's really one of the reasons why we're doing this webinar now about how to attract newcomers into boating. So moving swiftly on, just to touch on some of those key trends which have really been accelerated by the pandemic. This thing about localism, obviously, yeah, many of us are much more, we're staying local, we've had to, but we're shopping more locally. But there's also a consumer expectation now on brands to support other local businesses, and so like businesses in the community. So that's a consideration for running your businesses. Obviously, yeah, we know that people are wanting to be outdoors. That trend has gone up again significantly in the last year. And the trends about coming back to nature, digital fitness, that were all there, that we uncovered with Futures, have increased, and that's again exacerbated by the staycation effect. We're seeing new consumers, and we saw this in the boating industry last year. There's going to be more young adults taking UK holidays inevitably, and we're talking about these generations that really are looking for lots of different experiences. So that's another great opportunity for us. The trend towards looking after yourself, mental and physical health, natural fitness, self-care, again, accelerated by the pandemic, something boating can tick the box with in a big way. We know how good it is for our health being out on the water. And really importantly, the digital expectations, again, accelerated rapidly. Again, we heard last week at the British Marine Expo, this huge uplift in online shopping and the expectation on a really good quality user experience when they hit your website. So for things like shopping, and probably more importantly for this webinar, booking, it's really important that all works very well and it's easy for people to find out how to book. And just touching very briefly again, at the conference we talked a lot about the differences in generations and their buying behaviours, and really the focus being on these younger generations, how to attract more of them to become sort of new boaters. This is the generation that, you know, want experiences, they're less likely to own stuff, and they're the generation that also they've got different learning styles and are less likely to want the certificate. They just want to get started. And then when we think about what that means for us as a training school, probably, and this is a bit of a generalization, but typically we're probably more comfortable selling and marketing to the older generations, that's my generation and above, I should say, and understanding what Gen Zs and Gen Ys, millennials want is perhaps slightly new territory for some of us. So we'll touch on some of that as we go through today. Another really important trend that will come up as we talk today is this trend about boating is perceived as complex by newcomers, and there's also a huge fear of failure, this fear of embarrassment. And this has come out of research done by British Marine, specifically on barriers to boating by people who haven't yet gone boating. Things that we need to just keep in mind that affect how we market. Oh, going backwards again, sorry. So the key questions that this starts to raise, really it's understanding who are the right segments, and by that we mean sort of your customer groups to be targeting. Who are these newcomers? And understanding what their needs, their pain points are. So what are we selling and who to? And do we have some products or services in your portfolio of products that might appeal or attract to some of these newcomer groups? And then the other questions it starts to raise is, do we make it easy to find us? And do we make the actual process of getting started easy? And that comes down to things like, you know, online experience, but actual experience in person. And then once they've come and done something with us, how easy is it? Do we have a pathway for them to keep going? What's in your product ladder that can help them keep going and do more? And then from a communications point of view, that side of marketing, it's about, you know, are we using the right channels to reach them, and are we using the right messaging to get to them? And just on that messaging, a really important point is thinking about, are we selling the dream first? And the reason I'm talking about this is so often I come across sites where the very first thing I see is the product and service that's for sale, as opposed to the why do I need this widget, gadget, course, whatever it is. And with boating, the industry is particularly sort of poor at this. So this is actually an American website. Think about selling the why, the outcome of coming to do a course or an activity day. This is what they get. It's the dream. The boat is actually the vehicle that gets you there. So what a lot of this points to, these different generations, is really the effect that one size does not fit all when you're trying to match products and marketing your products to different consumer groups. And if we think about attracting different groups of customers, you know, here I've got a group of young professional adults. How are we going to appeal to them? These guys are the Gen Zs, Gen Ys, young families. They're the generation that might have chosen not to have a car. They'll use a Zipcar service. You know, we've got to think differently. They're not just going to jump in their car and drive down to you. You might be needing to think about, do we have a service that collects them from the station or something on those lines? So this is what I mean about really understanding the different customer groups. So we're just going to talk a little bit more about that. So the key question has got to be, when you're defining your products and services, is what you've got and relevant to the groups that you're aiming it at. Now, typically in marketing, we have a sort of a way of profiling customers, and I'll cover that in a moment. But I think also what I find as a marketing consultant is people often have, and I do it myself, you have a picture in your head of who you think your customer is. And I always hear, well, our customers want this, they don't want that. But my question back on that is, well, what about the customers that are not actually booking? The ones that you don't hear from? Do you know what they want? And that's really important when you're starting to think about reaching out to new customer groups, not just the same ones, same type of customer you've always had. So when it comes to profiling customers, there's a number of formats, and I've got one for you, which we'll see in a moment, where you can look at things like location, demographics, their status in life, their social status, income brackets, their interests. All of this, again, I think we're probably fairly familiar with, or we have that sort of sense of knowing it. The marine sector has perhaps been over the years a bit less good at doing the piece on, do we understand age, do we understand gender and ethnicity? But that's a great opportunity for us all. And what we've got to try to avoid doing is putting all customers into one pot. As I said, one size does not fit all. It's really worth considering looking at segmentation differently. As I say, looking at the differences in generation. You could look at it by women's groups, disability, ethnic minority, but it doesn't matter what's appropriate to your business. You can decide that, but it's really understanding what those needs are. So really, as an example, for someone of my age, I might want to do a course that gets me a certificate, but my 30-something nieces who are based in the city with young kids, they don't want to do that, but they do want to do things and they do want experiences. So it's just understanding the differences and aiming stuff for them in a way they'll understand. Now, this is a profile tool. It's a very typical marketing one. It's one I use for my business, and that's available, I think, in the handouts. So you can download that if you wish. It just gives you something to work from. But really usefully, coming out, well, this is already out from British Marine. They've already done a piece of segmentation work, having done the barriers to boating research. This is a segmentation piece on what do newcomers look like. And they come up with 5 groups. I'm not going to go into them in detail here, but we've got some really useful groups. There's more detail behind this for each group, but it helps you understand what these want, what their interests are, what their concerns are. Again, really important when you're marketing to them is understanding those pain points. And it's all people who've not yet tried boating. So that's available to British Marine members. Certainly can be downloaded from their futures section on the website. And the useful thing about this work is it sort of crosses over things like gender and ethnicity, because it was a broad brush look at people who have not yet started boating. So you might find that useful, and you can use it as a tool to compare with your own customer profiles. Another little tool coming up soon from British Marine, which was announced last week at the Expo, which I've had quite a bit to do with behind the scenes, also is introducing a profile tool. Certainly in the reality section, you're going to get fact sheets on all the social trends that we've talked about at the conference, and the participation facts, the barriers. And then the toolkit part, the options toolkit, there's a tool in there about profiling customers and their pain points, and then matching using that tool. It's a big one-page tool that you pin on the wall and use lots of post-it notes with. Can't recommend it highly enough. And that, again, watch out, that will be coming soon, as they say. But here's a useful model, again, one I use a lot, of understanding your target groups. So I've got 3 groups here at the top, drawn from the British Marine surveys, the Instagrammers, the social challengers, and then a useful model for just thinking about what products have we got in our portfolio for these customers. So starting with right product, what have we got that's relevant? Is it in the right place? This is a bit more about the where and how can they find you. So that might be online, offline, where they're going to come across it. Timing is important, timing in the buyer's cycle. Sorry, my mouse is playing up. And also timing on things like social posts. When are you putting your posts out? If you're doing it at 9 in the morning and we're trying to aim at young professional adults, I can pretty much guarantee they're not going to see it. So you might want to think about scheduling posts at times that they're going to see it. And pricing. Again, thinking about pricing. This is more about, not just about affordability, but it's about things like payment options, packaging up offers, people using top-up cards, Apple Pay. Are we set up to deal with some of this? And just as a really quick example of an organisation that has sort of thought about their products and right timing and right place, it's a club in the West Bristol Corinthian that was offering sailing lessons, was offering racing, was struggling to gain members. By changing and offering paddleboarding and changing their name to Cheddar Water Sports, they suddenly had something they could offer to the local community, got people coming down paddleboarding, gained new members, and then from that were able to take people from paddleboarding and invite them to do taster sailing days and This Girl Can activities. Suddenly they've got more people, more happening, more newcomers, and building their membership. So that's the sort of thing that thinking about your products can do to help bring in newcomers. So quickly moving on, then that takes me nicely to the subject of finding more customers, finding new customers, and then getting found by them, meaning how do they find you? And I've broadly broken this into sort of 3 areas: community, collaboration, and then we'll talk more about communication. But just before we go into depth on that, just want to step back and think about the journey your potential customers take in their buying process. Now, this is a model that works for any sort of buying. It's a proven model. It's just been adapted to think about it more from the customer's perspective than the seller perspective. And it doesn't matter how complex or simple the product is, you go through this process. So it starts with, hang on, over here I've got our group of potential newcomers, and at this point they have never heard of you at the awareness stage. At the interest stage, it might be that they've seen something or once or twice seen a post or something and beginning to get interested. Then they get to the point, if they're really interested, they want to find out more, they'll do their due diligence, they'll dig around a bit, read stuff. Then they might get to the point where they want to try something, dip their toe in the water, literally. And then they might decide they do like it, they're going to buy it, adopt it, book it. And then even having done that, there's still a point at which they're questioning, have I made the right decision? And as I said, this journey is the same. If you're doing something really simple, quick and easy, say you're on a holiday on the beach and the kids want a surf lesson, that process might take, no more than a few minutes to jump through all of these steps towards that buying stage. If someone's thinking about selling up and sailing around the world and taking the family with them, but they haven't yet started boating, that's a much bigger and longer decision, and that process of coming towards you might take them a lot longer. And the converse of this is their touch points. So we've got our buyers on the right hand side of the screen, and on the left hand side we've got the experience that you offer. So as they're starting to find out about you, it might be that you've sent out a social media link. Is it directing them to the right content? Is your website really effective when they get to you? Is your inquiry handling really good when they get in touch? Do you get back to them fast, accurately? When they come to you for that first experience, it might be a taster day. What was that like? What was the welcome like? What were the people like when they got there? And then what are you going to do to follow up? Once they've had that experience, then you can follow up. Now, we've talked a bit about the Cheddar Water Sports, for example. This is the opportunity. You can bring people in, get them to come and try, and then once you've opened that door, you've got the opportunity to sort of move them forwards to other things. So we're wanting to find more new customers. Well, a good place to look is sometimes just outside your door, the local community. And we know already that there's a trend towards localism. So it doesn't cost much to necessarily go and talk to other local groups. And depending where you are, there could be activity groups, there could be camping, caravan clubs, other outdoor activities, there could be social clubs. But a lot of these organisations, a bit like boating, are looking to add better value to their members. They're looking for more people to come in and join them. And by working together and mutually offering things, you can sometimes help extend to new audiences. And it may be that you can invite their members to open days or offer them special offers on experience days. It may be that you can share facilities and let them come and use meeting rooms. But it's about getting people over your doorstep or coming to find you so that they know more about you, so that you've got more opportunities for interacting. So collaborating, local community. On a slightly more commercial basis, there's things like the tourism industry, hotels, B&Bs. Again, people want staycations. If you're in a destination area, people are going to want things to do. They're not just going to sit in the hotel. Are you talking to these guys? Have you got their literature in your place, and have they got your literature? And another area is obviously schools. Now, I realise that's a really big topic. We do have the on-board programme, but also sailing and windsurfing is back on the curriculum, and I suspect a lot of teachers don't know that yet. And there's also the very huge Sport England agenda about mental and physical health, which is another way of perhaps opening the door with teachers going back to schools and a lot of children in a very difficult place at the moment, maybe a door you could open on your local community. So some thoughts there for you. Just some considerations on partnerships. There's some great benefits. Obviously, I've mentioned reaching new audiences. You can do joint communications. They might put stuff in their newsletter. You could put their stuff in yours. There's economies of scale, things like joint advertising, obviously some added value. And very usefully, you've then perhaps got an organization, you can have some credible web links, which is really good for your search engines, for more people finding you. If you do any sort of collaboration, even if it's fairly informal, just manage it. You know, it's reciprocal, it's got to be two-way. So write it down just on one page, both parties agree, track the results. If it's not working, bin it, move on. There's no point having a partnership that isn't actually a partnership. But there's some other angles on this idea of collaboration as well, which is an industry thing. Now, consumers have got plenty of choice at the moment, and boating is competing with other leisure sectors. We're not competing so much with each other, we're competing for people's time, that tiny bit of time, and with all this other activities they can go and do. And what we all need is more customers with a lifetime journey in boating. And they're going to go through some kind of process of needing skills to get started, then they're going to need to build experience. That's where they might need a club or a pay-to-play provider. They might want to own at some point. They might then need marinas and chandlers. And then they might need to go further. They might want to improve. They might need more skills. So it is, when you think about it, we're all working together. And there may be some collaborative partnerships as well by working with the local club, with pay-to-pay providers, even the chandlers, of really helping people on this journey, as well as making sure at some point you've got a product and service in your lineup for what they need. We can't all supply everybody everything. So if you get to a point where we've done the starter course, we've done the next thing, they need to go somewhere else now, well, refer and hand them over. Anyone who gets a good referral and well looked after will remember that and reciprocate. And even if they don't come back to you themselves, they'll probably refer someone themselves back to your organisation. And more participants for all of us is better for everyone. So jumping on to communications, just going to take a sip of water before we do. This side of marketing is a huge topic, the communication side. You're going to be relieved to know, not going to deal with it all today. So the paid media side, advertising, online, offline, we all know what that is, but I'm not talking about that today. The partner networks, I've talked a little bit about that, and in that bucket, earned media, you've got things like PR, ambassadors, influencers, the people that can refer you. The more you look after them, the more they refer you. But we're primarily going to be talking more about the owned media. And I'm going to pick on a few things here. And owned media is things like your websites, your blogs, your social media, videos, all that stuff. As I say, because we don't have a lot of time, we're just going to focus on that area. So what about reaching customers who are further afield from your local community? And the question here really being is, how strong is your profile? We know from figures released recently by the Tourism Alliance that over 55% of people at the moment are saying they want to be near water. So if you're in a coastal destination somewhere, that's a really good thing for your business. But the big question is making sure that they can find you. And bear in mind that this staycation effect is here to stay for a little while. So these guys, the search engines, are really, really important to us. And this is where content is absolutely king. You've kind of got to be on the playing field to be able to play the game. And the other thing I'd be, with things like search engines, don't assume that you're necessarily ranking on the first page. Always clear your computer cache before you search for terms like local sailing centre or training centre, because you might be surprised. What the game is here is about getting people to be able to find you when they are looking, and that's for their next activity. And almost certainly, if someone's thinking, what are we going to do this weekend, this holiday, this summer, it's most likely going to be a digital approach. Now, for younger generations, it may not be an approach to websites. It might well be that they're searching on social media, on YouTube, on TikTok, on these different channels. These all work as search engines. And if you're not present there, they're less likely to find you. And the search engines are all about drawing people to your, effectively, your digital front door. So I've got here a little example. We've got a group of young women looking for a new activity. They want an experience. And so when they're looking via their devices, you need to be found. And you've got to be there, as I say, when and where. So it's channels, but also timing. You know, are your social posts up at the right time? And as an example here, I've just borrowed from Go Paddling. This is a really nice landing page looking for an adventure. And down here, we've got where they can go, the paddle points, and what they can do, the paddle trails. So almost instantly, I've landed in the right space. There's two good things to click on. It's not complicated. It's something we can see ourselves doing. Off they go, delve in, find out where to go, how to get started. So let's just talk a bit about what content is. Content is everything from posts you put on your websites, from blogs, articles. It could be webinars like this, frequently asked questions, even something like an ebook, a download. Great advantage of doing something like that. If they want more information, you can ask for their email address in order for them to have it. So there's lots of things that fall into what we call the content bucket. But more importantly is, why am I banging on about it? Why do we need it? The why is because online it can help answer specific questions for specific audiences, and that helps with targeting. So we're talking about trying to find new customers. So have we got content that will engage them, will help build our credibility in their eyes for the younger generations? That's really important. And it may be stuff that's offering advice, showcasing your expertise. It could be videos. Let's say there's all sorts of things. But the key thing is using the content in a way that helps you get found. And coming back to our buyer's journey, again, here's my example. It might be that they've seen something online, digitally on Instagram, having noticed you, beginning to get interested. So they'll go from the social post to the blog, watch it or watch the video. They may even sign up for an email to be on your newsletter. Then they're getting more interested, so they might look at the review sites, so they might look at TripAdvisor or Google reviews. And then you've got case studies, things they'll look at. And then if you're lucky, they might get to that point where they really, really want to try something. So you've got to have content that's taking them and drawing them through this process. They might want to come to a taster day and then ultimately move them forwards. So this is kind of how your marketing's working in the background to help them draw them through these buyer stages. And mainly today we're discussing the first few stages as awareness and interest, leading them through to the try it stage. Okay, so I've got an example here of content again from Go Paddling site, where another really important thing about content is using really good, simple language. Boating is stuffed with jargon, we all know that. Newcomers are not going to know the jargon, so using language that they can connect with and identify with is really helpful. And answering those questions, what does SUP stand for? Who can do it? Really simple. It's also important with imagery. Pictures tell 1,000 words, and people will identify with something if they can see themselves doing it. So if you want to attract young people or community groups, you need to look like it, but you also then need to mean it with what you offer and what you say. So be careful of reinforcing sort of stereotypes and pictures of middle-aged men and sailing in red trousers and that sort of thing. Just make sure that your imagery matches up the consumer groups that you're wanting to appeal to. Now, the other thing about language is it comes back to the right thing at the right time. Language is important, and the jargon thing is important, that we negotiate this, because I often see something like this as a homepage, which is fine if the customers coming understand and they're already into boating and they're expecting to see these names. That's all perfectly good, and so we need that for those customer segments. But for a newcomer, if this is the only thing they find, it might be a bit confusing, because how are they going to distinguish themselves as am I a competent crew? Am I a day skipper? What am I? Where do I go? So it's really important to have additional pages and additional content. That might be blogs, it might be other product pages, and reframing things slightly in the language of the people you're trying to appeal to. And I've got a cracking example of this from the equestrian sector, which I came across. And this is lovely because you've got different elements of courses here, starting from scratch, building confidence, canter with confidence, all really good stuff, especially if you're a bit nervous, if you've got that slight fear factor about getting started. Now, if all of these elements happen to lead to the British Horse Society stage 1 and they get a certificate at the end of it, well, happy days. But it's not necessarily the first reason for starting. That what they're doing here is bringing people in, answering the question they've got and offering them a product that matches what they want and what they want to get out of it. So that's a really important way of just sort of thinking about reframing what we have in different language to achieve the same outcome, but just in the framed right for that particular consumer group. Another important thing about content is answering the questions. And it comes under, if the one thing you take out from this, they ask, you answer. This is about addressing barriers, pain points, the key things they need to know. And there's an adage in marketing that, in fact, people won't necessarily start that conversation with you now. It's not like the old days. There's so much more information online. They expect to be able to get some answers before they even might sort of press the get in touch button. So the things they need to know are, how much does it cost? How does it compare? What are the negatives? You know, what answer my concerns? And they want to know what other people are saying. So they're looking for comparisons. They're looking for basically us to answer the difficult questions. And again, some really good examples I've seen of this actually come back to Go Paddling. Great example here about paddling with a disability. 12 top tips, how to do it, how do I get started, preparation, and then a bit more information on the right about staying safe on the water. You know, they're answering the questions, and you can do that without even having to pick up the phone. You can get the answers. Now, one of the most single unasked questions, asked questions, but I'd say perhaps sometimes it's unasked, is this one. And I've kindly borrowed from Tim Peake, astronauts, but I think it's true of everything. And you think about boating for newcomers, trussed up in a wetsuit all day, offering a long all-day course. Goodness me, what does that look like? How do we go to the toilet? It's these sort of pain points that we need to think about, because coming back to our segments and understanding their pain points, this thing about, you know, fear of embarrassment, fear of looking stupid is really important, especially for the younger generations that are in a very image conscious era with social media around them. So again, something that Go Paddling have addressed really well, I think this is really impressive, is they've got up a page about women and menstruation, what to do about it on the water. You know, it might feel a bit odd and a bit toe curling at first, but this affects about 50% of our population. So if we don't answer the difficult questions, it might be a reason that people are not doing it. The point is understanding those pain points. It's not necessarily this one, but I just think it's a really good example. Understanding the pain points, getting the content online, and the content is then there for when they ask the question on their search, they can come up with the answer. And if that answer happens to be on your website, well, happy days. So think about how you address some of the difficult questions that you frequently get asked. So let's just look at how a good piece of content can work. And jump back to our prospects journey. We've come up with an idea for content that's learn to sell in 6 easy steps, and I've got our new audiences here waiting to come in. They don't yet know about us, but we can pop this out on social media. This gives us 6 social posts immediately. You might also choose to do some digital advertising and point them to the blog. If they're interested, they might then read the blog. You might have a landing page ready. You could even do some videos on each topic. If they get more interested, they'll be back on those review sites. They might even download the full article. You get a chance to sign them up to your newsletter. That's where they'd have to opt in and give you consent. They might come down to do a taster day. And once they do, if they've come and got involved, sent you a proper inquiry, got involved, you then have under GDPR legitimate interest to follow them up. That means you don't need an opt-in. You've got legitimate interest because you've got something relevant. You can't go and sell them a car, but you could then talk to them about the next course, your tri-sailing day or something else. So keep that in mind. And when I'm talking about things like social media and some of this stuff, if you're unsure about how you're going to do all this and how you're going to frame it right, think about it. There's probably people in your network who can help you. That might be children, grandchildren, or people in your local community who do know some of this stuff and who understand their own generation, who can help talk to you about what their generation wants to know. What are their questions? So you can help develop your content yourselves by not looking very far. We're just going to touch on now how Google works because we're getting a little bit short of time. So I'm going to rattle through some of this. The bit we're going to focus on here is the on-page factors. There's lots of technical stuff behind the scenes. That's more for your webmasters. But the on-page factors are really, these are some quick wins that you can do. First of all, I've stolen an image here from a client I've just started working with. Beautiful image, really lovely site, but they're using language here which doesn't tell Google or the customer exactly what they're doing. And that's really important. If you've got an image, Google can't read the graphics on it. So it's really important that when you load the image up, behind that, you always have a box called for the alternative text, the alt text. You need to put your keywords in the alt text, and in this instance, it would have been outboard engines. And the reason to do that is if I'm searching for outboard engines, your search returns always come up with images for that particular topic. Now, my picture would have come up in here if it had been tagged with outboard engine. Why is this relevant? Well, let's just look at a few examples that I've picked up. Fantastic image here, lovely website. A few points to understand about how Google works. This message in the red box about we're closed for training, I don't know because I didn't build the site. If it's a text box, Google will be reading that as the first thing it sees on the page. That's a really important slot. And that slot isn't saying anything about who this company is, what they do. If it's an image, it's not a problem because Google can't read it. The next line down, book your course online here. Great message, call to action. But again, if this is a text box, Google can't understand what sort of course it is. It might be one about gardening. If it's an image, again, it can't read that, not a problem. So potentially on this site, the very first word that Google can read, and again, another important heading position, the welcome, great message, it still doesn't know who you're welcoming to. So welcome to our training center, welcome to our courses, something, or our sailing training courses. It's got to have those keywords in there. It's lovely and friendly, lovely site, but just a few kind of ideas there that to think about your silent audience, which is the search engines. And another couple of quick examples. Again, lovely site here, beautiful image, learn to sail, perfect keyword, but Google can't read it if it's on the image. This first heading position, they call H1 headings, you need your keywords in here. The first paragraph, you always need your keywords in that first paragraph. So say what you do, say what the page is about. And you also need to put related keywords. It doesn't have to be the same keyword, it's the same subject. So Google's starting to read the page and understanding it. So just as an alternative on this page, learn to sail, capture that in the heading, get a location in there, destinations, people are searching on stuff, whether it's local or where places to come to. Get the keyword into that first paragraph, tell them what you do, and then get related terms into the secondary headings. And again, as a great example, from Go Paddle, I bet you can't guess what the keyword is on this page. It's in the URL at the top, also known as the slug. It's in the header, it's in the first paragraph, and it's in the secondary headers. Keywords are important. You need to be mentioning them maybe about 5 times in an article that's about 500, 800 words long. And getting these keywords into the right places is really, really important for Google to be able to find you. And then just on content, whatever you produce, it's always got to have a clear purpose. What are you trying to say and who to? Try to include an outcome. It could be a call to action, get in touch, book here, anything like that. And always think about having, it's really one theme per page. And that's true of your products too. So if you've got lots of different products, they each need a page so that the keywords for that product are really clear to Google. It understands that page, and it's going to get better at returning your page if people are searching for it. Always keep your content authentic, write it naturally, add the keywords later. Customer readability is priority, so shorter sentences, make it sound right, and then just tweak afterwards. And then finally, we're just going to come on to a few important things. Google My Business, this is really important. This is, if you see on the right hand side of the page here, this is the page that pops up if you've got a Google My Business page set up. If you haven't got one, there's a link at the end to sort of show you how. Do this because A, it's a free service, it's an additional place to put posts, to post up events, put content about your products and services, but it's also really important for Google search engines to match you with your Google My Business page and your website. Use the other review sites like Yelp, TripAdvisor, LinkedIn, FIFO, whichever suits you, but wherever you've got a free listing, take it, like Yelp. And also use the activity listings that are available. Most of the tourism sites will accept things like the experience days and taster days and starter level courses. And there's also, I've talked about Go Paddling, but also just finally, there's a new site, British Marine have launched last week, On the Water. This is a really good tool now. It's open to all boating activities for entry level, and it's free and it's open to non-members at the moment. So get your company listed. The idea is it's not a booking site, it's a listing and location. So people searching, it's all aimed at the consumer. People searching gives them a chance of finding out what's on locally, and then you'll get the inquiry referral across to your contact details. So go find it, onthewater.co.uk. And I'll stop there. Sorry, that's taken a little bit longer than we first thought. Thank you very much for listening. I think now it's time for questions, Amanda.
Hi Liz, thank you very much for that. And we've got a few questions, but I think you went through and answered most of them actually as the presentation went on.
Okay.
So I'm going to pick out a few, and apologies if I don't get these over correctly, and then just maybe re-pop the question in, because some of them aren't that straightforward.
Right, okay.
So the first one I've got, and actually we did have a poll for it, and I wonder whether we want to do the poll after I've asked this question actually, Liz. So this one is, what is your recommendation on timing of social media content? For example, one post a week, one post a month.
Oh, crikey. My recommendation would be more regular than that. I know it's difficult to do, especially if you're doing everything else, but you should be aiming for, I think, really 3 to 5 a week. People want to know that you're active and busy, but the best way to do that is don't feel you have to sit down 3 to 5 times a week. Get familiar with the scheduling tools that are available on Facebook itself. If you set up a business page, there's scheduling tools. So you can sit down and do 6 posts ahead of time and plug them in over the next couple of weeks. And there's other tools like Buffer and Hootsuite that enable you to do scheduling ahead of time. So you write them all out, get the images all together, load them up and schedule them. That's probably the easiest way to deal with it.
I think this actually moves on to another similar one actually, and this is one that you and I have spoken about, Liz. And so this person is saying, I'm not particularly good at social media. Is it therefore better to employ someone else to do this? And if so, where might I find somebody to do something like that?
Yeah, good question. There are specialist agencies around. There are some who specialize in marine as well. So probably start with Google, quick search. As well, recommendations, talk to other businesses, who do they use? But yes, definitely you can outsource things like that. And what you'll have to do though, again, is probably once every couple of weeks is work with that person, talk about what you've got coming up, help them find the right imagery and let them do the messaging for you and come up with a schedule. And I think that probably relates to the poll question that I didn't run as I was talking.
Do you want to run it?
Shall we do that now? Just
yeah, should we do that?
if I can.
I think the other area is that you might have some people hidden away in your club or your centre that actually could take on that role themselves. So there might be some people that actually are actively using social media, and that you could engage them to do that job and learn from them and do it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, yeah, asking around, use your network to ask
Yeah.
other people. Okay, let's just run this poll then. The question is, I'm just going to launch it now, is do you actually have a content plan? Because this relates to things like your social media. So it might be that you're doing things ad hoc, it might be that you're doing things last minute, or it might be that you're doing things 3 to 6 months ahead. So if anyone out there would like to answer, fabulous.
There's a lot of ad hoc going on there, Liz.
There's a lot of ad hoc. That's perfectly normal. But lovely to see that some of you out there are planning ahead. And in a way, what I'd suggest is you need to do both, because we can plan everything, but of course we also have to respond to things that are happening. But it really is worth thinking about all that stuff I was talking about. Content, don't overface yourself, but map out your next 3 to 6 months. Think about what would be a really useful piece of content, a single piece for attracting newcomers. Work on perhaps developing that video or that blog, then use it, break it up and put it in your plan that you're going to do. Come back to the thing I said, you've got an article, 6 tips on starting boating. You've then got 6 posts. You can do 1 on each tip. That can take you over the next 2 or 3 weeks. You could then do a video about it and put that up on YouTube. You can then break that blog into bite-sized chunks and use it for your newsletter. So one item can then work for you across a lot of different, pieces of marketing that you need to do, that you can then, as I say, schedule it in, bang it in your content plan. We're going to do a newsletter every 2 weeks. We're going to social post. Of course, you'll have ad hoc items, so then get those out as well. But having a plan just helps you formalize and make sure you're sort of ticking some boxes. Right, I'll close that poll. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got this one came in quite early on in the presentation actually, and it was about the order of people checking reviews and then consequently cost. So this question is, would you necessarily put them in order? I think sometimes people check reviews first and then consider the cost afterwards. What are your thoughts?
It's never a linear process, I think, are my thoughts. And just that, even that sort of buying model that I was talking about, awareness, interest, evaluation, we draw it out linearly. Of course, people are hovering between all of those stages, and the bigger the buying decision, the more they're perhaps going backwards and forwards along that line. So I don't know that there's any sort of, what am I trying to say? I don't know there's any sort of hard and fast rules. I think it's probably what feels most natural for your business. Yeah. And also, I suppose another side of that is having information in different places that people will stumble across it as well. And so whether that's reviews, whether that's pricing, having different points. So for example, take a website, making sure that there's different pages that are pointing across to might be displaying a review or pointing to testimonials, and other places where you're pointing them more specifically. You've come this far down and you've read this much, you must be quite interested. I'm going to point you to the prices. And that might be sort of a helpful thought.
Yeah. This is quite a tricky one, I'm afraid, Liz, and we'll just have to see how we get on with it, I'm afraid. Right. So, but I think it's probably quite relevant to quite a few of our clubs and centres. So the question is, what's the ideal marketing strategy and target of on-water activities if our club only has a few instructors or volunteers? So it's quite a big question, but I wonder if there's some specific top tips we can give somebody who's got a smaller instructor and volunteer capacity.
Yeah, and it's a really important one because, yes, you've got to be able to work within your resources and what you can cope with. So I think my starting point would be understanding the strengths of the resources you've got, what your specialisms are, understanding more about perhaps your current customer groups, are more of those available of that particular group? Do they, have we got more people locally who look like our current members, our current customers? Do we need to be looking elsewhere, perhaps to other local community groups? And then having that discussion about what's the most appropriate thing that we can offer that's feasible to do, that we can manage. And if that's a taster day, or if it's a specific type of activity that suits the strengths of what you've got on offer, I think it comes back to the point I think I said earlier, is that we can't all do everything. You've got to do what your strengths are.
Yeah.
And it may be that you can extend your offer by buddying up. So if you're a club and there's another training centre nearby, you can perhaps buddy up and cross-refer, so that you've got your strengths, water sports or whatever the item is you're doing. There's things that you can't actually manage, but cross-refer that person to the next thing they need. Work with that organisation, make sure they're cross-referring back, and do this. Come back to this sort of collaboration piece. I don't know if that helps answer the question.
No, I thought that was really good, actually, and it kind of leads on to a question here, and I think I understand what they're asking. So they're basically saying that if you look at what we're trying to do and our programs that we're offering in a similar manner to the way that you would look at a swimming pool program, you can develop product offers across a number of different new groups of people. The challenge they're then finding is the balance between the racing and the leisure, and not narrowing their membership. And I think you've kind of answered that by what you're saying, by looking at the strengths that you've got within your group, within your instructors and within your volunteers. But is there anything that you can offer as some advice with that balance of racing and leisure?
Yeah, again, it's a very good question, and it does come up, and it's the example I used of Bristol Corinthian. Actually, it was a very sensitive issue for that organisation when they made that step change to Cheddar Water Sports. And I think it is about the sort of sense of inclusivity. So making change is never comfortable for people. So it's understanding those groups that you have got, that they're still wanted, included, needed. And I think, again, just something that Cheddar did, Water Sports, was the new logo and the new signage. It's Cheddar Water Sports, home of Bristol Corinthian Yacht Club, because all their traditional racing members were still very much wanted and needed a home. So I think you've used the right word, Amanda. It is balance. It's helping your existing members or customers understanding where they sit, and that they're still very important, but also helping people understand what sort of change and offers are needed, or new market, sort of market, bringing in new customers, and what you might have to do to do that. And perhaps some of those people might help become your next volunteer. Some of those racing people, if they're brought on board, understand what the problems are, maybe they can come and help. Again, it's a difficult one to answer in a few seconds.
It is. It's really hard, and actually the questions are really interesting, and they're quite broad. I think this is probably the last one we've got time for, actually, Liz, and it's quite an interesting one. And I think your presentation looked at this in many respects. The question is that they work for a council. They're quite restricted with their web layout. So any top tips to make it as appealing as possible? And I think you gave a few top tips there, and I just wondered if you wanted to summarize any of those as a kind of final part for today.
I really understand that challenge. I think primarily then, as my top tips would be really good imagery, if you're able to use imagery, and one good quality image is far stronger than lots of not so good ones. Really targeted wording. Think about the audiences you want to reach, the sort of search terms they might be using. Those will help pull out your keywords. And there's a link in the presentation at the end to give a bit more about understanding keywords and how do you find them and stuff. So make what you say as compelling and inspiring as possible within the space that you're allowed within that website. That is a problem for organizations where you're part of a bigger organization and you haven't necessarily got control. but I think, yeah, it's like having a, you know, student bedroom, decorate it as best you can with how you want it to look, you know, in that space that you've got.
That's
But
great.
then you
Thank you
might have
very
other
much.
tools. There may be other tools that you can use outside of the website, so don't forget your other channels, like social media, LinkedIn, and stuff. It might be that you could to do other things elsewhere.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Liz. So we're going to share that. We've had a number of people ask for the handouts of your slides, so we will do that, and we'll send that via email either later on today or when the recording's ready. We'll add a link into the recording so people can come back. But as you said, there's a handout in the control panel if people want to download that. And a huge thank you, Liz. Really interesting presentation. We will be putting the recording up on the training support site, so do come back and have another look. But from us, Liz, thank you very much for taking the time. Really interesting.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for listening and for staying on the webinar. That's been a pleasure to do. Thanks very much. Okay.
Lots of thank yous and brilliance coming through. So thank you
Oh,
very much,
lovely.
everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.